Good morning. I think I see the room filling up, so I will give a couple of seconds till I see a pause on the participants as they enter. Okay. Good morning again to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon to those where it's relevant. Good evening, good night from wherever you are across the world. My name is Karen MacDonald Gale, and I am the Chief Executive Officer at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. This is the opening ceremony for CBF's second Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress. And this year's theme is Advancing Circular Economies. I'm so very happy to see you all here, and I see the numbers climbing. We have over 415 participants registered for the event, and so we're so very excited to be able to have these discussions with you this morning. Let me point out that we have translation available with the little globe tab on the bottom for French and Spanish, so please, we hope you will be able to use those, and we encourage you to ask questions through the question and answer tab that is there. And as I already see, you're also very welcome to introduce yourselves in the main chat so we know who we have and where you're from. As we start today, I also want to say this is just a start, so please still encourage everybody to register and join. They can join now at CaribbeanConservationFinance.org, and please also post about the Congress on your involvement using the hashtags CCFC 2023 and CBF events. So we look forward to seeing many social media posts as we go through the program. So for today's program, I'm very pleased to introduce the chair of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, Mrs. Carolyn Trubetskoy. Mrs. Trubetskoy is the Executive Director, Marketing and Operations Manager at Anse Chastanet, and I know she does other duties that she tells me about when we're on calls at all points in time for Anse Chastanet and Jade Mountain Resorts in Soufriere in St. Lucia. She also serves as the Honorary Consul for the Federal Republic of Germany in St. Lucia. Throughout the past 30 years, she has served in many leadership roles in the tourism sector in her homeland of St. Lucia as president of the St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association, and regionally with the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association and the Caribbean Alliance for Sustainable Tourism. She came closer to the CBF side of things actually first in 2019, but again in July 2020 when she became the chairperson of the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund. And in this capacity, she joined the board of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And last year in Freeport, we were pleased to welcome Mrs. Trubetskoy with her new appointment as the first female chair of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. Carolyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Karen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And a special welcome to Mr. Christopher Corbin, our keynote speaker. Welcome also to our Congress speakers, our circular economy experts, and of course, welcome to all of our stakeholders and all other participants that are online. As the chairwoman of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and on behalf of the entire organization committee, it's an honor to open our 2023 Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress. For this, which is our second such Congress, our theme is Advancing Circular Economies. Our region, as you know, is graced with such great natural beauty and known for its rich biodiversity and vibrant cultures. But sadly, we also face significant challenges, from climate change impacts to habitat degradation and the loss of our native species. Our Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is committed to supporting all efforts that preserve and effectively manage our precious biodiversity, and our natural resources. In September 2022, I had the privilege of signing the Advancing Circular Economy Facility, in short ACE. This agreement was signed in Freeport, Bahamas, and funded by the KfW on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. The objective of the ACE facility is to contribute to the reduction of marine litter in the Caribbean. Our ACE facility will allocate grants, providing funding for approximately 20 individual projects that embody circular principles to prevent waste from polluting our marine environments or to facilitate the removal of existing marine litter. Today marks an exciting milestone, and I hope you agree. This is our collective journey of discovery and partnership with the shared goal of advancing biodiversity conservation in the Caribbean through the lens of circular economies. Circular economies represent a transformative, even revolutionary concept designed to maximize resource efficiency, minimize waste, and create sustainable economic systems that work in harmony with nature. By adopting these principles, we have the opportunity to design innovative paths that not only safeguard our environment, but also fuel economic growth and social well-being. Our Congress serves as a platform for us to come together, exchange ideas, learn from best practices, which we know are out there, and above all, motivate each other. It's through our collective creativity, teamwork, partnerships, and innovative action that we can instigate the essential transformations that are necessary to assure a sustainable future for our Caribbean region. Over the next 2 days, we will hopefully immerse ourselves in diverse subjects encompassing innovative finance methods, private sector participation, sustainable tourism, and community involvement in conservation finance. Collectively, we will explore how circular economies could revolutionize our funding and endorsement of biodiversity conservation endeavors. We look forward to learning from our distinguished speakers, fostering productive dialogues, and as a result, fortifying our capacity to navigate this urgent journey towards a future of greater sustainability and prosperity for our Caribbean. I want to express my deep gratitude to all the speakers, panelists, and contributors who have generously offered their time and expertise to this Congress. Your valuable insights will be catalysts for change, driving us towards effective solutions, and it's inspiring us to push boundaries. To our participants, thank you for your presence and your dedication to this cause. We hope that you will come away from this Congress knowing even more and being even more inspired. But we're looking also for your active engagement and your collective wisdom, which will be the driving force behind the success of this Congress. Together, we can make a real difference in conserving our unique and precious biodiversity here in the Caribbean. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt thanks to the organizing committee, our dedicated team behind the scenes who have worked tirelessly to bring this Congress to fruition. Without your dedication and determination, this gathering would not have been possible. Together with our board of directors, we sincerely thank you. As we embark on this transformative journey, let us embrace the spirit of collaboration, innovation, and resilience. Together, we can shape a future where circular economies will flourish, biodiversity will thrive, and ensure that our Caribbean ensures to sparkle as a gem of natural beauty for generations to come. Thank you. And let us begin this Congress with enthusiasm, determination, and a shared vision for a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for those words. We are very pleased that you're able to join us. And let me take the opportunity to add my own thanks very early and to big up the team, the magic makers that have been working on the back end, as we've been calling it, of the operations that you won't see too much of on the front, but we will all meet over the next 2 days. They are from Island Innovation, who are our co-organizers for this event and a CBF partner of many years, and of course from the CBF team. Let me take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit more about the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. We are an umbrella environmental fund that's been operating in the Caribbean region for just over 10 years. We currently manage a portfolio of $150 million that has been being used to implement innovative solutions and consolidate regional conservation impacts in the Caribbean through a range of financial and other conservation instruments. Our aim is to find and to ensure funding that is continuous and that is focused on conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean. Currently, the CBF has 3 areas of focus or program areas. We have an area focused on conservation finance, one on climate change with a focus on ecosystem-based adaptation, and our newest program on nature-based economies with a focus on advancing circular economies. You're going to hear a lot more about. The conservation finance program focuses on the provision of funding towards the protection and management of biodiversity and natural resources, and is mainly supported through our endowment fund, which currently stands at just under $100 million. The proceeds of the endowment fund are invested in country-based sub-accounts and are channeled through partner national conservation trust funds, who in turn lead grant-making programs at the national level. And some of the activities we have on the ground through that program include protected areas management, establishment of and management plan design, infrastructure within and outside of protected areas, environmental education, community engagement, environmental policy and research. We currently have 13 endowment sub-accounts, 12 of which have or will soon be making payments in 11 countries throughout the region. So we're very, very proud of what we've been able to achieve in 10 years. The Conservation Finance Program also works on organizational development. It has a component that has capacity development that works with projects aimed at strengthening the network of Caribbean conservation trust funds in the region. So not only in giving support for work on the ground, but also strengthening the institutions that we have helped to foster and design. We then have a climate change program that is focused on supporting effective climate change solutions and measures in the marine and coastal zone of our insular Caribbean. The flagship initiative for that program is the $50 million ecosystem-based adaptation facility. And the facility was designed in partnership with the German government under the International Climate Initiative, or ICI, and through the German Development Bank, KfW. To date, that program, the EBA facility, has awarded 27 grants and dispersed over $8 million to local, national, and regional projects focused on ecosystem-based adaptation. And finally, the program and the facility that we're going to hear a lot more about, the Nature-Based Economies program, is developed around our Advancing Circular Economy, or ACE facility. The ACE facility will work with public and private sector partners, as well as other Caribbean stakeholders, to fund projects that promote and apply practical circular economy principles to minimize, prevent, and remove waste entering the marine environment and or removing marine litter. The CBF will work on initiatives such as these and will aim to Caribbeanize this approach. That's my word that I've been using a lot. Caribbeanize our approach and determine the best investments for long-term results that may include infrastructure, and will consider factors of other programs and projects already on the ground, the generation of data, the sharing of knowledge, policy support, and education for consumers. This is just a start of reaching the CBF's mission that we have, which is a Caribbean region where both the natural environment and our people thrive. We have just concluded, as I mentioned before, our 10th year and our 10-year anniversary celebrations. And I encourage you to go to our website and grab our 10th anniversary report to learn more about the work we've been doing. One of the key partners that we've been working with, as I mentioned before, is the German Development Bank, KfW. I mentioned their role in the EBA facility. They are also the largest funder of the CBF Endowment Fund and will be funding the ACE facility on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. Unfortunately, they're not able to join us in person today, but I'm pleased to introduce Vanessa Hartman, who is a portfolio manager in biodiversity and natural resources for the Latin American Caribbean division of KfW, who has sent a video message. Please go ahead and play that message. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I am sending you greetings from the KfW headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany. My name is Vanessa Hartman. I'm a portfolio manager at KfW Development Bank in charge of our regional marine conservation projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. The topic of this year's Congress is extremely important considering that pollution is one of the major threats to this very fragile and at the same time globally unique marine ecosystems that we have in the Caribbean islands, with up to 2,000 waste items per kilometer of coastline. The Caribbean Sea is at the same time one of the most polluted seas in the world, actually the second most polluted sea after the Mediterranean. So the problem is immense. At the same time, pollution has, of course, not only a dramatic impact on the marine ecosystems, but also on the people whose livelihoods depend on a healthy sea. So just to give you an example, UNEP estimates the cost of plastic pollution to marine ecosystem services alone at up to $144 billion annually. That's, of course, not for the Caribbean, but on a global scale. But I think it really highlights the impact, not only ecologically, but also economically, that marine pollution has. One approach that is becoming more and more popular is to rethink our traditional linear model of production and consumption. And that's what we nowadays call the circular economy approach. It's an approach where materials and products are kept in circulation for as long as possible, as many of you probably already know. And this is done, for instance, through a reduction in material use, the redesign of materials and products to be less resource intensive, and also the recapturing of waste as a resource to manufacture new products and materials. Despite the growing attention and also recognition of this approach, our economy globally is still very much linear, and we estimate that only 7% of the world economy is circular to date. So there's still a lot of work to do, and the German Development Bank KfW, as one of the two founding members of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, was very pleased to see the CBF embark on the journey of advancing the circular economy in the Caribbean in the framework of its new nature-based economies program. And we as KfW are very happy to be part of that journey. In October last year, the CBF and KfW signed a new grant agreement for the funding of the CBF's Advancing Circular Economy, or short ACE facility. The German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development through KfW is providing grant funding of 25.7 million euros to support the establishment and operation of the ACE facility. And this is with the objective to contribute to the reduction of marine litter in the insular Caribbean. The ACE facility will work with public and private sector partners, as well as other Caribbean stakeholders, to fund projects that promote and apply practical circular economy principles to minimize, prevent, or remove waste entering the marine environment and remove marine litter that has already entered the marine environment. And the supported projects will be selected through the well-known call for proposals process. As I was mentioning before, the project is still very young. So we're currently in the inception phase of setting up the Advancing Circular Economy facility, and we'll soon be providing more information on those upcoming calls for proposals. So stay tuned for more information if you're interested in the work of the facility. For KfW, this new project contributes to our engagement in the framework of the Clean Oceans Initiative. This is a joint initiative of European development banks that aims at the reduction of plastic pollution in our oceans. Maybe you've already heard about it. The initiative has provided financing totaling 2.7 billion euros since its inception in 2018. And that's for projects, for instance, in the area of waste management, but also circular economy around the globe. So coming back to the Caribbean, I'd like to congratulate the CBF on hosting its second Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress.
Okay. The fun of technology and video clips. Thank you very much, Vanessa. And since I know you will be watching the recording, we are so sorry that you're not able to be with us live and direct. And we look forward to working with you on the ACE facility project. So now we move into the main presentation. When we decided on our theme for this year, we were in search of a Caribbean champion who would drive the message home. And I am so thrilled that the first choice, the first person we asked, the first person we thought would be a good fit was able to join us. Mr. Christopher Corbin is Royal Caribbean. He is a St. Lucian, born in Barbados and living in Jamaica now. When I first met Chris, which was just the other day, right, Chris? He was with the government of Jamaica at the UN table, working with their negotiations. He joined UNEP in September 2004 and has served as the program manager for the assessment and management of environmental pollution subprogram and for the communication, education, training, and awareness subprogram since 2015. Of note, Chris co-authored and facilitated the development of the region's first Marine Litter Action Plan, the Regional Marine Litter Strategy, and the first State of Convention Area Report on marine pollution. Under his stewardship, the Land-Based Sources of Marine Pollution Protocol for the Cartagena Convention was entered into force, and the number of contracting parties has increased from 2 to 15. Since 2020, just last year, 22, Chris has now been named as a coordinator for the program, the UNEP Caribbean Environment Program, and we're very pleased to have him with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, to give you more insights on his 30 years plus experience and to speak to us about shaping a circular economy for all, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Christopher Corbin. Chris,
thank you so much, Karen. Let me welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our participants virtually. It certainly is a pleasure to share some thoughts, maybe some reflections, considering the circular economy and how it could apply to the Caribbean region. Let me begin by again thanking Karen and really congratulating the entire team at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for this second Caribbean Finance Congress. When Karen asked me to deliver a keynote address for a finance congress, I was wondering if she had the right person, because I don't have a finance background. I'm not into business, and I've probably been in this environmental field a little too long, but I thought it was really important, and it's really heartening to see how the conservation world, the business world, the financial world are all coming together to help advance our environmental, economic, and social development. We've been talking about sustainable development for a long time. And I think, as mentioned in her opening remarks by Caroline, circular economy does offer a transformational opportunity for all of us. So I'm going to share a presentation that I think will perhaps allow us to reflect a little bit in terms of what circular economy approaches are all about. And I think it's important to recognize that it is about shaping a circular future for all, not just businesses, not just individual sectors, not just industry, but the entire population. Traditionally, our linear extractive model has been highly dependent on natural resource extraction, commodity exports, and that has really driven economic development in not only in the Caribbean region, but globally. But what we've seen, particularly as Caribbean small island developing states, is that such a linear model is in no way sustainable and has left the region very vulnerable to external shocks. And these were only exacerbated during the COVID crisis. The circular economy now provides an opportunity for all of us to rethink how economy and society work and how do they work together. It needs to reimagine our production and consumption patterns, not just from the products, but the entire systems that produce these products. And it offers an approach that has been gaining traction throughout the world, and I dare say right here in the Caribbean. But as I said, I come from an environmental background, and one of marine pollution. And for those of us who've been in the business a while, you might recall that when we talked about development and when we talked about economy, there were two principles that were the foundation of many regional and global negotiations. One being the precautionary principle. And this dilemma, do we prove that a product is safe, or do we prove that it's not safe? And the concept of polluter pays, something that was ingrained in many environmental laws throughout many Caribbean countries, and one would dare say even up to today, is still one that is challenging. And in helping to determine the direction of our development, the term EIAs became almost synonymous with development planning. Environmental impact assessments were designed to help us identify the most appropriate option, the most appropriate development pathway. They were supposed to be participatory. They were supposed to ensure that there was balance between environmental impacts, but also economic development. I'll let you decide if EIAs have really been effective in terms of our development agenda. Then we evolved and said, well, we needed to look not just at environmental impact assessments for projects or for investments, but also for our policies. Policies that we have now, are they really helping us move towards a path of sustainability? As small island developing states, we are faced by a number of impacts on a very small resource base, whether the impacts are from industry, from agriculture, from domestic, from household use of waste and disposal, from wastewater management, and our resources that we depend on as a Caribbean, as a small island developing states, are extremely limited. And the whole concept of being able to assess not just one single impact, but multiple impacts. Somewhere along the pathway, we then started to realize that as small islands, we needed to weigh cost and benefits. We needed to have some form of risk assessment to the type of economies that we want to develop, to the types of investments that we want to embark on. And the idea of doing risk assessment for our projects, for our activities, became something that started to permeate the development planning process. And maybe for the first time, late 1970s, we started to target industry. And we started to target industry by encouraging them to adopt cleaner production processes. And I'm telling you a bit of this story because a lot of the elements of a circular economy approach have been there, and they've been there for several years, targeting businesses, targeting consumers, targeting governments, targeting civil society, but perhaps not always being brought together in an integrated and holistic manner. So when we talk to industry about cleaner production, we talked about product modification, we talked about technology change, we talked about equipment modification. How can industry help produce effectively, but by producing less hazardous and toxic waste? And for anyone who has been in the waste management sector, the 3 R's, or maybe it's now the 4 R's, or perhaps it's the 5 R's. Anyone who is in done Environment 101 would have heard reduce, reuse, recycle. That was a mantra that anyone involved in waste management was exposed to. But it evolved over the years. Other concepts came in: refuse, repurpose, rethink. And these are some of the elements that are now also forming the basis for circular economy approaches. And then linked to the industrial change that we need to see on the business side was this aspect of green chemistry. Now, it seems that term is not used perhaps now as much as it was a few years ago. But when you look at the circular economy and when you look at the elements of designing out hazardous substances, for example, you realize that a lot of the principles that were identified in a green chemistry approach are again reflected in circular economy approaches. In these principles for green chemistry, for example, you see elements of design for degradation. You see elements of designing safer chemicals. You see elements of prevention. And again, those are now being brought together in a more integrated way as we look at circular economy approaches. And probably the most recent drive was reflected in our efforts at sustainable consumption and production. This perhaps recognized for the first time that the issue of waste management was not simply an issue of consumer behavior. It was also an issue of production, an issue of waste management, from collection to disposal. It was an issue of lifestyle and the choices that we make individually, but considering a number of other issues, including marketing, including sustainable procurement, including sustainable transport, and including cleaner production and resource efficiency. And I would say that sustainable consumption and production really started to become the major basis and framework on which circular economy approaches are now being proposed. The idea of sustainable procurement, particularly within businesses and within government sectors, has also taken on a new dimension. Procurement now relates to how do we get our goods and services to serve society, but not impacting on the natural resource base, by not impacting on the environment, but also being done in a cost-effective way. It's about looking at circular approaches. It's about looking at equity as far as business development. And it's about looking at negative impacts as it relates to climate change. How do we manage our terrestrial resources? How do we manage our use of potable water? And at the same time, how do we continue to build a healthy, empowered, and productive community? So yes, it's about using our resources effectively. It's about using them efficiently. It's about using them economically towards a goal of sustainability. And one of the early representations of the circular economy started to reflect that, yes, this is not only about end-of-pipe treatment. This is not only about reduction, reuse, and recycling, the lower part of this circle, which many of us are more familiar with, but it's about how do we acquire the raw materials? How do we design differently so that we produce less waste in the first place? And how do we continue this transformational effort so that at the end of the process, we have as little waste as possible to dispose of? So in essence, we're moving from our traditional linear economy: extract, manufacture, consume, and dispose. As you heard in one of the opening remarks, to a large degree, many of us are still practicing a linear economy approach. The circular economy is meant to close that gap. But even within the circular economy, the elements of those R's that I mentioned earlier are now reflected at each level, from recycling to redesign, to reduction, to reuse, to repair, and to recovery. But it's interesting, for many of us would remember, any of us who have brothers and sisters, the idea of second-hand clothing and third-hand clothing. And all of us had tailors that you repaired buttons, you repaired your electronic equipment. Now you get a piece of electronics that has a very, very, very well-noted message that says, warranty void if opened. And when it becomes more expensive to buy a new product than to repair one you already have, this just exacerbates the linear economy model that we've used for so many years. So it's really about how do we, as a collective group of consumers, also make the demands of industry so that we can, in fact, have those systems in place that allow us now to repair, to recycle effectively, to redesign effectively. I wanted to move to a little bit how the United Nations Environment Programme, and particularly how it's looking at this whole concept of circular economy approaches, and perhaps how they could be applied to the Caribbean, and in particularly to Caribbean small islands. And the first guiding principle is reduction by design. And this really relates to the extraction processes as well as production. And this is one of the major features, for example, in the current discussions on a possible new agreement that would look at plastics, the International Negotiating Committee that is looking to develop a new globally binding legal agreement. And the principle of that is really addressing upstream sources. Within that, then you also have these multiple circles, some of which represent interactions between businesses, interactions between consumers and users and businesses, and interactions between users. So if you look at issues such as recycling and repurposing, that's very much a business-to-business interaction. When we're looking at remanufacturing and refurbishing and repairing, we are looking at the interaction between us as consumers or users as businesses. And then you have reduce and reuse and refuse, which is really within the purview of us as consumers. So this is really about an integrated approach that must involve all of society. It's not just for businesses, it's not just for governments, and it's not just for consumers. We all have a role to play if a circular economy approach is going to be successful. What does that mean for us in the Caribbean? It means, of course, having a vision as a people, a vision as a region, a vision at the national level, in terms of sharing that vision and adopting environmental stewardship, recognizing, for example, the conservation and sustainable use of our natural resources, our biodiversity. It's about appropriate technology, and here appropriate, I mean what's most appropriate for our unique circumstances as a region and as Caribbean small island developing states. It's about energy efficiency, exploring renewables, low carbon manufacturing, and maximizing the use of raw material. Small island developing states and the Caribbean have been identified as a high potential for the use of renewable energy and the circularity of that resource, less dependency on fossil fuels. Here again is a key element of a circular economy approach for us at small islands. And ultimately, this is also about economic benefits, but sustainable economic benefits. It's about jobs, yes. It's about employment, yes. It's also about appropriate business models and ensuring that we have the right supply chains in place. So circular economy benefits are multiple. And as a region, we have to decide where would be our best investment to make a circular economy approach work for us. It's about raw material conservation. We are small islands, limited land mass. We can't afford to extract what we don't have. It's about innovation. It's about how do we stimulate our young people, our entrepreneurs, to design and implement solutions that are appropriate for our socioeconomic development. Develop products that are more durable, ensure that we generate green jobs, are more efficient in our operations, and also reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So fundamentally, we are looking at a reduction or just an overall reduction in resource consumption. We are looking for the opportunities to reduce, to remanufacture, and to recycle. But I want to point out here that recycling is not the panacea. It's really about looking at the entire life cycle. It's about looking at all of our consumption patterns, from energy to water to waste generation. It's about looking at our packaging. It's looking at our transportation. It's really talking about sustainable development like it should be, an integrated approach covering the pillars of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. So circular economy, and it's really, again, I want to congratulate the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund for really embracing this as one of their thematic areas, and in particular with a focus on nature-based solutions, because circular economy can in fact be that catalyst for conserving and preserving nature and the sustainable use of our resources. Circular economy looks very much at the production side, the consumption side, and waste management, but also fundamentally looks at the use of our natural resources, both terrestrial, coastal, and marine, and resources that are so needed for the natural cycle, for our animals, for plants, for natural producers, for the very basis that our entire economy as a region depends on. Old Calypsonian Trinidad and Tobago said we have what? Nothing else but sun, sea, water, and sand. We are based on our natural resources, our environment, our tourism sector, our general mode of operations as a region is very much dependent on our terrestrial, coastal, and marine resource base. So circularity is really a way to achieve one of the fundamental sustainable development goals relating to sustainable consumption and production, but it's also a way of achieving multiple sustainable development goals. And you've heard that achieving these sustainable development goals has to be done in an integrated manner. So whether or not it's Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation, or 14 on oceans, 13 on climate change, gender equality, good health, decent work. These are all elements of where resource efficiency, human well-being, and environmental impact are going to see the ultimate benefits. So circularity does indeed challenge our way of thinking. So the transformation that we need to see is not just a transformation in technology. It's not just a transformation in policies and laws and regulation. It's a transformation in our mindset, in how we see our economic development. What do we want as a people in terms of a sustainable future? As you heard, it is inspired by nature-based solutions because we keep materials at the highest possible value along the value chain. And in this case, the entire value chain matters. It's not just finding an end-of-pipe solution. It's about looking at it from production, from extraction to production to disposal. And it does require all stakeholders to be involved: users, producers, consumers. And therefore, we need to see how do we then identify where do we need to invest? And again, this is a financial Congress, so it's about where is the biggest bang for our buck? How can we disconnect natural resource use and environmental impacts from economic activity and human well-being? The traditional model is that we can only get economic growth and human well-being if we continue to exploit and overexploit our natural resource base. That paradigm has to change. We have to demonstrate that we can conserve, protect, safeguard our natural resource base while at the same point in time ensuring economic growth and social equity. So the circular economy is in fact fully supporting the 3 pillars of sustainable development: environmental, particularly as it relates to reduction of production, consumption, material, energy use, and the discharge of waste, whether it be solid waste, liquid waste, or air emissions. It supports economic development through the reduction of raw materials and energy costs, waste and other emission costs, the risks that I made mention of earlier, and the fostering of innovative new product designs and business opportunities. It's about stimulating entrepreneurship within the Caribbean. And it's about social equity and social justice. At the evolution of a shared vision, a shared economy with joint social decision-making and cooperative use of capital. So ultimately, sustainable development, people, planet, and profit, working together in a way that ensures the future of our generations. So I wanted to end by perhaps throwing out a few things that I think are very relevant for us as a region, as the Caribbean, but perhaps also highlighting that there are some challenges, and there are some challenges that we need to overcome if circular economy approaches to work. And so we have to continue to promote, both within the region and outside of the region, less extraction of virgin raw materials. We have realized that we are all connected. The Caribbean is not standing alone. We are part of the global landscape. What happens outside of this region affects this region. And we only saw it with COVID. We saw it again with the war that's ongoing in Ukraine. We need to reduce consumption of fossil fuels. And now this is not about a climate change presentation, but it just makes sense. We need to extend the useful life of products through actions such as recycling, but not only recycling. We need to generate less waste. Ultimately, we need to foster innovation, economic growth. We need this consistent program of awareness and education to allow for the change in our consumption habits. This is the transformation in the mentality, in the thinking, in what our values are as a people. And we need to be more independent. We heard mentioned earlier about the importance of resilience. We've heard too often that Caribbean, small island developing states are vulnerable. Yes, we are, but we are not helpless. And it means that we have the wherewithal, the intelligence, the knowledge, the experience to in fact build the resilience that we need as a Caribbean community while generating new jobs and responding to the needs of our people. But we have to realize that there are challenges that we are going to face, challenges regarding, for example, our regulations as it relates to business enterprises, general lack of environmental awareness. And I'm almost embarrassed to say that even now, after all of these years with the environment on the agenda, the awareness and understanding of environmental issues is better, but still we have some way to go. We need to look at the economic barriers and how do we access more affordable financing. Again, Caribbean Biodiversity Fund is filling some of those gaps. We need to recognize that moving towards circular economy approach will require retooling of our workforce. And this is where our academic and research institutions need to play a role. What are the technical skills and capacities that we will need in our workforce to take advantage of these new circular economy opportunities? And a recognition that we talk about zero waste. It's a great target and ambition, but we have to realize that that's not going to happen overnight. And for a certain amount of time, we are going to continue to generate waste that is difficult to recycle and difficult to transform. And what are we as small island developing states in the Caribbean, how are we going to handle that? And then we just have to look at consumer acceptance. For those of you who live in countries that ban single-use plastic bags, you know just the acceptance of using a reusable bag. And it took time for that change to take place. It took time for people to realize that they did not need plastic straws, that they could actually use other straws and be completely happy. So we have to realize that that level of change of behavior and perception is needed. And then I would like to end by pulling out some of the recommendations that I was able to extract from a recent publication by the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of what are some of the opportunities for conceptualizing a circular economy in the Caribbean. And the researchers and analysts of that paper felt that renewable energy development represented a really great opportunity. Looking at efficient waste minimization, and here I'm talking about all waste, not just solid waste, plastics, but also sewage, biosludge, industrial waste. We have to look at the entire process of waste generation. Water resource management, integrated water resource management. For those who've either been suffering too much rain or too little rain, how do we now have our utilities? How do we price water so that it is more reflective of the cost of production? How do we do that while still ensuring the right to adequate water and sanitation? Some other interesting ideas, performance bonds for public and cultural events, developing efficient land-based transportation, 2, 3, 4, 5 vehicles for one household, all relying on fossil fuel. Is this the most sustainable approach as it relates to transportation? Establishing green and blue investment bonds, setting optimal carrying capacity for our natural resource base. Many of our governments are talking about blue economy approaches, ocean-based economies, and maximizing on the opportunities, the economic opportunities that will be brought about by exploring what resources we have that we could develop. But we need to be careful. The very first principles that I presented on precaution, we need to understand that natural resource base. We need to understand the capacity of that natural resource base. And we need to understand the interconnectedness of that natural resource base, especially as small islands. And I think most importantly, as a people, as a region, we need to recognize that our economy is shared. Again, the impacts of a single hurricane, the impacts of a drought, the impacts of COVID-19 show just how much we are all connected as a people. And circular economy and circular economy approaches will require all of us to work together rather than in isolation. So on that note, I'd like to again thank the team for having me sort of set the stage. And unfortunately, I might not be able to sit in for as many of the sessions as I would like, but I do wish you the very best of success. And as the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat, we look forward to continuing to work closely with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and the several other regional and global partners who have put this on the front of their agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for a very insightful and well-presented discussion on circular economy and why it's so important to the Caribbean. You said a lot of what I've been saying and echoing the need for circular economy, in particular in our small island developing states, is so important. And it has to be solutions that come from us in the Caribbean, who know what will work for us in the Caribbean. We don't have a lot of time for questions, but there was one that I will paraphrase a little bit and see if you want to respond quickly to. And that's the idea of, how do we get the governments involved? Are they convinced on circular economy and the link? And what do we need to do to help them to think about things like circular economy and fossil fuel reduction? What works for getting the government's ear?
Yes, it's really an important question, because I think there are really these three real focus target groups we have to look at. We have to look at private sector industry. We have to look at governments, we have to look at the donor community, and then we have to look at general public. Now, if you understand governments also a bit, let's be open, the governments are political animals, and therefore they are going to react to a large degree demands that are coming from their constituents, from their public. So I think we need to be able to demonstrate that first of all, circular economy approaches are going to result in net benefits both at the local level in terms of their constituents, the general public, but also in no way disadvantage or to prevent what is seen as social and economic growth. So I think we have to demonstrate that this is a win-win situation. I think we have to show to governments where are the current barriers to adopting circular economy approaches. I think it's all well and say, let's adopt a circular economy approach. But are there legislative barriers? Are there policy barriers? Are there economic incentives and disincentives that are in place that actually mitigate against us moving into a circular economy approach? I'm not sure if we're doing that type of analysis fully, to be honest. And I think that's the sort of debate we need to get ministries of finance involved. We need to get ministries of planning involved. So this is not an environment issue. This is not an industry issue. So I think it's really important that we start with this incremental step-by-step process, but we need to have that long-term goal, that vision, that target, so that there is some element of achievement and progress.
Thank you very much. And we are wrapping up this morning's session. We have invited Chris to come back. He's going to make every effort, I know, to come back for the second panel discussion that's coming up. And hopefully we'll be able to take more questions then. Thank you so much, Chris, for your presentation. So as we wrap up this session, we are going to have our first break for you to stretch, grab your coffee and tea and anything else. It's the start of 2 exciting days of discussion. So we welcome you to come back at 10:30 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time. If you're in Jamaica, that's 9:30 a.m. for the first panel discussion of the Congress that will focus on considerations for using circular economy and biodiversity conservation. So drilling down a little bit more into the discussions we've had. We have a range of panelists, a circular economy quality specialist. We have somebody from the Guam, where it's very late in the night, so we're very appreciative that he'll be able to join us. And we have somebody from the Basel Convention Regional Center to walk us through it. You will see the link in your email, or if you go to our website, CaribbeanConservationFinance.org, you will see what you need for coming back on at 10:30. Let me check that the logistics team is happy. And if they are, we will be closing this link and we will be back with the next session in half an hour's time, basically. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to Carolyn and to Chris in particular for walking us through what I know will be the start of an exciting set of discussions coming forward. To those with questions that we didn't get to, we promise we will put some answers and some other questions to the panelists so that you will have some answers. Thank you very much to all.